If you look at the world map, you'll hardly find two countries more tightly connected than Yemen and Oman. Situated on the southern edge of the Arabian Peninsula, these two nations not only look similar in shape and size, but their geography and natural resources are also almost the same. They both have roughly equal oil and gas reserves and are located right on top of two of the world's most critical choke points. Oman rests right on the edge of the Strait of Hormuz, through which nearly all oil and gas from the Persian Gulf flows before it reaches the rest of the world. Yemen, on the other hand, is located right next to the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. That's the spot where 80% of Asia and Europe's trade flows through. It's the shortest route connecting these two continents. So both of these countries are sitting on extremely important geopolitical spots, and culturally, they're pretty much the same too. Both are Arab nations with a shared language and very similar traditions. Majority in both countries are Sunni Muslims, although Yemen also has a group called Zaidi Shias, which currently holds most of the power. In Oman, things are a little different. About 45% of the population follows the Ibadi sect, 45% are Sunni, and around 5% are Shia. But ethnically, they're both Arab nations. But when it comes to economic condition, the difference is massive. On one hand, you've got Oman, one of the most developed economies in the Middle East. Its Human Development Index, HDI, is 0.82. Just for context, the HDI is measured from 0 to 1, with 1 being the best. This number basically reflects how well people in a country are living. Now compare that to Yemen. Its HDI is only 0.42. On top of that, its GDP per capita ranks 9th lowest in the world. Even its neighbour, Saudi Arabia, has an HDI of 0.87. So how does a country surrounded by such wealthy countries end up with 82% of its population in extreme poverty, where people don't even have access to food, water, education, or basic healthcare? And on top of that, for the past 60 years, this country has been trapped in endless conflict. Since 2014, a brutal civil war in Yemen has killed over 150,000 people and displaced millions. Now Yemen exists more as an idea than a functioning nation. Inside Yemen, power is split between rival groups, each backed by different foreign countries. The Houthis control the major cities, with strong support from Iran. The central and southern areas, shown in white on the map, are dominated by Al-Qaeda. The red zones belong to various Sunni groups armed and funded by Saudi Arabia and the UAE. And that small yellow section, that's controlled by the Southern Transitional Council, a group that wants to break away and form its own country. Yemen is broken apart. But how did things get this bad? Why is Yemen, despite having similar geography and natural resources as Oman, so far behind? To understand that, we need to look at their history, leadership, and how outside powers shaped them. Let's rewind the clock back to the 1500s. In 1519, the Ottoman Empire took over northern Yemen and ruled it for nearly 400 years, right up to the end of World War I. At the same time, in 1507, the Portuguese colonized Oman and took control of its key port cities. But the Omanis didn't stay silent. By 1650, they united and kicked the Portuguese out, reclaiming Muscat and forming the Omani Sultanate. Not only did Oman gain independence, it grew stronger. They learned from the Portuguese how to dominate trade across the Indian Ocean. From Iran and Pakistan to India and East Africa, Oman became a major power in the region. Oman's influence once stretched from Muscat all the way to Zanzibar. Every part of that route was considered part of their empire. But in 1872, things changed. Oman signed an agreement with the British Empire. In return for protection, Britain got access to Oman's resources and territory. This deal lasted until 1951, when Oman finally became independent. But independence didn't bring progress right away. The Sultan who took power was extremely conservative. He banned modern technology, stopped people from talking in public for more than 15 minutes, and even made sunglasses illegal. Naturally, frustration grew among the people. At the same time, oil was becoming more valuable, and Britain didn't want any instability in such a strategic country. So in 1970, the British helped organize a coup. They convinced the Sultan's own son, Qaboos bin Said, to take over. And on July 23, 1970, Sultan Qaboos removed his father and took control of Oman. For Oman, that moment changed everything. Qaboos wasn't a democratic leader, but for many Omanis, he felt like a savior. When he came to power, the country had only 3 schools, 19 hospitals, and 10 kilometers of paved roads. Just 15 years later, by 1985, Oman had over 500 schools, more than 100 hospitals, and 3,000 kilometers of paved roads. But Sultan Qaboos didn't stop with roads and hospitals. He made deeper changes that transformed the nation. He abolished slavery. He gave women the right to vote and allowed them to take part in local councils and national discussions. And when oil money started coming in, he didn't just store it, he invested it in the people. He introduced a policy called Omanization. It meant that foreign oil companies had to train and hire local Omanis. This reduced the country's dependence on foreign workers and gave locals real opportunities. As a result, the standard of living rose dramatically. But Qaboos also looked ahead. He knew that one day, oil might not be enough, so he pushed Oman to invest in tourism. In 2023 alone, nearly 4 million tourists visited the country, bringing in billions for the economy. Another thing that made Oman stand out was its religious freedom. Whether you were Shia, Sunni, or Ibadi, everyone was free to practice their faith. This tolerance made Oman unique in the region, and it turned the country into a trusted peace broker. The Saudi-Iran peace deal? Oman helped. Back-channel talks between Israel and Iran? Oman tried to mediate. Even the 2015 nuclear deal between Iran and the US happened, thanks to Oman's quiet diplomacy. While other countries took sides in Middle Eastern conflicts, Oman stayed neutral. Whether it was the Iran-Iraq war, the Houthi-Saudi conflict, or the Qatar blockade, Oman stayed out of it. That's why the country earned a special title, the Switzerland of the Middle East. So on one hand, you have a nation that rose because of smart leadership, bold reforms, and long-term vision. But just across the border in Yemen, you find a very different story, one of conflict, collapse, and missed chances. Earlier we saw how Yemen stayed under Ottoman rule for centuries, from the 1500s until the end of World War I. But now there's one key detail you need to understand. A detail that shaped Yemen's history more than anything else. Its mountains. Yemen's mountain ranges isolated many parts of the country, especially the Zaidi Shia communities who lived deep in the highlands. This isolation cut them off from the rest of the world. As a result, they became much more conservative than the people who lived along the coast. We've seen a similar pattern in Saudi Arabia. Coastal cities like Jeddah, Mecca, and Medina were more open because they traded with the outside world. Inland cities like Riyadh, however, stayed conservative and closed off. The same thing happened in Yemen. For over 400 years, the Zaidi Shias resisted Ottoman rule, and when the Ottoman Empire collapsed after World War I, they didn't waste a second. They filled the power vacuum in the north and established their own kingdom, called the Mutawakkilite Kingdom. This Zaidi group would later evolve into the Houthi movement we know today. So after World War I, Yemen was split in two. Northern Yemen came under Zaidi rule, and the southern Yemen stayed under British control. In the north, the Zaidis were led by Imam Yahya. He was known to rule with an iron hand, especially harsh towards Sunnis, Christians, and Jews. Naturally, this caused a lot of resentment within the society. Then came a turning point, a moment that exposed the double standards of political power. In 1962, Sunni military leaders in the north revolted against the Zaidi monarchy. They launched a coup, overthrew Imam Yahya, and tried to establish a new government based on Arab nationalism. But this wasn't just a routine military takeover, and this was the start of a full-scale proxy war. On one side was the Arab nationalist movement, backed by Egypt. On the other side was the Zaidi monarchy, supported by Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states. Egypt wanted to spread its nationalist revolution across Yemen, but the Gulf kingdoms were panicking. If Yemen's monarchy could be overthrown, theirs could be next. So here's the twist. Saudi Arabia, known for its hard stance against Shia groups, was now backing a Shia monarchy in Yemen. Why? Because for these powerful nations, it was never really about religion. It was always about power. Religion was just a tool to control the public. This war turned into a brutal conflict in northern Yemen. It dragged on for 8 years, and nearly 200,000 people lost their lives. In the end, the nationalist forces supported by Egypt won. The Zaidi monarchy was overthrown. But while all this was happening in the north, something else was brewing in the south. A new revolutionary group, the National Liberation Front, rose up against British colonial rule, and in 1967, they kicked the British out of southern Yemen completely. This group was heavily inspired by communist ideology, and they didn't want anything to do with the north. They wanted to build their own separate country with a new identity. So by 1970, Yemen was officially divided. The north backed by Arab nationalists, the south ruled by a hardline communist regime. And once again, another Cold War-style conflict began. The United States supported North Yemen. The Soviet Union backed South Yemen. This was the only country in the Middle East where communism had truly taken root. The Gulf monarchies were stuck in a tough spot. They had just witnessed the fall of the Zaidi monarchy, and now they were staring at a new threat: communism, a system that hated monarchs, kings, and everything they stood for. So even though the Gulf rulers didn't like the Arab nationalists, they chose to support North Yemen because to them it was the lesser evil. For the next 8 years, North and South Yemen stayed locked in a cold, uneasy standoff. Then in 1979, under pressure from the Arab League, both sides agreed to a peace plan, but the real unification didn't happen right away. It took another 10 years before the two Yemens finally came together. In 1990, North and South Yemen united united, forming a single country, the Republic of Yemen. And its first president, Ali Abdullah Saleh. He ruled from 1990 to 2012 and built one of the most corrupt legacies in the Arab world. A UN report later revealed Saleh stole over $2 billion a year from Yemen's oil subsidy program. Year after year, billions vanished, used to fund his family's luxury lifestyle abroad, while ordinary Yemenis could barely afford food. Just compare this to Oman. While Sultan Qaboos used oil wealth to build schools, roads and hospitals for his people, Saleh looted his country dry, and the damage didn't stop there. In 1990, when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, Saleh made another decision, one that would cost Yemen dearly. Saleh made a bold and reckless move. He openly supported Saddam Hussein, even though he knew Saudi Arabia and the Gulf nations were strongly against him. That one decision infuriated the Saudis. After the Gulf War, they cut off all financial aid to Yemen. But they didn't stop there. They also deported 800,000 Yemeni workers, sending them back home, jobless and hopeless. The result? Yemen's fragile economy collapsed, and just as the country was struggling to recover, another crisis erupted. In 1994, the southern part of Yemen, still angry about the unification, rebelled against Saleh's government. To crush the rebellion, Saleh made a dangerous deal. He gave Al-Qaeda room to operate inside Yemen in exchange for their support. It was a short-term strategy with long-term consequences. From that point on, Yemen began to fall apart. The country was now divided. Communists in the south, Al-Qaeda in the center, Arab nationalists and Zaidi Shias in the north. Yemen had become a powder keg, and the fuse was already lit. It finally exploded in 2011 during the Arab Spring. Just like Egypt, Tunisia and Libya, Yemen's people had had enough. They rose up, tired of corruption, poverty and dictatorship. Their protests brought down Ali Abdullah Saleh. But the fall of one leader didn't bring peace. Instead, it created a power vacuum, and every faction now wanted control. But in the middle of all this chaos, one group had grown stronger than ever. The Houthis, a Zaidi Shia group from northern Yemen, now backed by Iran. And now they were fighting on all sides, against what was left of Saleh's regime, against Al-Qaeda, and against Sunni groups from the south. The situation exploded in 2014. That year, the Houthis defeated Saleh's forces and captured the capital, Sana'a. They didn't stop there. They overthrew the entire government and declared their own rule. And with that, Yemen fell into another civil war, even more violent than before. A war that still continues today. But now this isn't just Yemen's war. It has become a battleground for global powers. Iran, Saudi Arabia, the United States and Russia. All of them are backing different sides, fighting proxy wars in Yemen. And who's paying the price? The people. Today, 1 in every 5 Yemenis doesn't have enough to eat. Millions have no homes, and an entire generation has no future to look forward to. With every passing day, Yemen sinks deeper into the quicksand of global politics. And that's why I always return to one key point. Leadership matters. Because when a country has the right leadership, it can change its destiny. Just look at Singapore, China, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and yes, Oman. All of them show what's possible when leaders think long term. But Yemen is now hanging by a thread. And with tensions rising between Iran and Israel, it's very possible that Yemen may be dragged into another devastating war, one that it may not survive. We've actually made a full video on this growing danger. You'll find the link at the end of this video. Until next time, take care of yourselves.